Art Stapleton does a great job covering the New York Giants for The Record and NorthJersey.com. The Giants sit at 23. Art, good to talk to you, my friend. How you been?
I'm doing well, Rich. And, man, I can't tell you, whoever picked Billy Joel's Moving Out for the Sun to come back at a break, I'm a huge Billy Joel fan, number one. And obviously, Moving Out is Who Needs a House Out in Hackensack. I'm a graduate of Hackensack High School, and The Record is based in Bergen County.
That's right, Bergen County Record. That's right. A paper I'm very familiar with.
I don't know if it was your producer or you. Or
I mean, we could give him credit, but I've been coming back to Billy Joel music for about 15 plus years now. But we'll give Josh some credit.
Josh a little credit.
All right, that's fine. He does something, right? You know.
Well done. It's a nice thing to hear on a Wednesday, a dreary Wednesday in Jersey.
That's right. This is true.
Heading up for draft tomorrow.
Yeah. We have no problem. Always good to touch base. We have it Thursday night in Philadelphia. All right. Listen, I guess the question with the Giants is pretty simple. You look at this offensive line, you look at the draft, it's not really deep as far as offensive line. I'm hearing a bunch of names. I'm hearing so many things, and I'm reading so many things, and I'm talking to so many people. Are they going to try to go tight end? Are they hoping that Howard drops? Are they going to go offensive line? What say you, Art? At the end of the day, I think their priority is line, but I also think they have a need for a linebacker as well.
Yeah, I would agree. I gave them Jarrett Davis, a linebacker from Florida, in my mock draft. I did a 7-round mock, too, for the Giants only the other day, and I went with a Philly guy, Deion Dawkins from Temple, offensive lineman in round 2. I do think that they want to get an offensive lineman. I mean, look, it's very hard to say. I mean, I jumped on the beat as part of our coverage team back in 2009, and I really took over the beat right after the Super Bowl in 2011. And since then, there really hasn't been a time where there's been so much uncertainty attached to a Giants pick. One of the reasons is picking at 23, you have 22 other teams and other options that could break one way and completely change what you have going on, number one. And number two, last year, if you remember, the Giants, there was a lot of talk about who the Giants liked, and it was Leonard Floyd and Jack Conklin, and it was going to be one of those two guys at 10.
Yep.
Well, all of a sudden, Tennessee trades up and nabs Conklin. The Bears leapfrog the Giants and get Leonard Floyd, and the Giants end up with the next guy on their board, and Eli Apple, and then everyone starts talking about how it was a consolation prize and the Giants talk too much. I can tell you that it's a complete opposite this year of what you're hearing out of the Giants building, what you hear from people around the league that you try to talk to and what they've heard from the Giants. You try to talk to agents, get a feel. I've even talked to some draftees, potential draft hopefuls, that don't really have a sense as to what the Giants are going to do. So to answer your question, I have no idea.
Well, but listen, you know what? I appreciate the honesty, and that might be the best thing for the Giants, because I think, look, you look at the other end of the spectrum with the Jets in their backyard. The Jets are going nowhere, so they've got to draft for talent and need going forward. The Giants, though, the question mark is, okay, Eli Manning, he's getting up there in age. He's a 2-time Super Bowl MVP. He's the franchise quarterback. When are they going to start to make that pick and groom a quarterback going forward? My counter-argument would say, well, wait a second. Some of the moves they made last year with spending all the money on the defensive side of the ball, we saw the offense struggle late. It had, it sleptwalk at times throughout the season. They bring in Marshall this year, another weapon for Eli. I think the window of opportunity for them to win is now. So I would maintain maybe you get a quarterback second or third round. Now, I still look, they haven't drafted a linebacker in the first round since Banks in '84.
Right.
I'm curious, what about Foster? Is that...
I had a debate on Twitter this morning with people saying, someone posed the question. You mentioned tight end earlier. Said to me, if David Njoku from Miami, who's a local kid up here in North Jersey at Cedar Grove, a tight end, and Reuben Foster were both there available for the Giants, who would they take? And I said I would probably lean towards Njoku just because of some of the off-the-field stuff with Foster. He's overcoming shoulder injury. Jonathan Allen of Alabama and Reuben Foster both had shoulder issues. Now, Foster was more of a torn labrum, so you hope that's not a continuation. But I think he would have to be in the mix for the Giants. You'd have to consider him. I mean, he's a top 10 type talent, but he's the kind of player that you look at, it's almost like a couple years ago when Leonard Williams was kind of floating past that 4 or 5 area, and the Giants really liked Leonard Williams, but they really didn't have a hole. It wasn't like, okay, well, we got to trade up to go get Leonard Williams, and then obviously he ends up with the Jets. I think the Giants would be interested. I think they like big school guys. They spend a lot of time on big school guys. They obviously have watched Foster at Alabama. We've all watched him. I'm just not sure that he even gets to that point. I think I had him in my mock draft going to 21 with the Lions, but I don't think he goes that far. But I like what you're thinking. I do think where the Giants are right now, they are not just taking a pick for this year, but there has to be a long-term view. And when you talk linebackers, the only linebacker under contract for the Giants beyond 2017 right now is B.J. Goodson.
Right.
And he's the guy who's supposed to come in last year, fourth-round pick, comes in, maybe he'll be the starting Mike this year. But other than that, you have a lot of guys whose future is uncertain here with the Giants. It doesn't mean they don't want to keep them, but it's just a matter of how things sort out in 2018.
Listen, the elephant in the room is the offensive line, and it's Eric Flowers. I don't care what weapons you surround Eli with. If you can't run the ball to set up the pass, if you can't pass protect, if you can't run block, then guess what? It means absolutely nothing to me. You know, I don't know. I'd like to believe that Flowers is still salvageable. You know, I look at the kid out of Western Kentucky, Forrest Lamp, and again, you know, to me, he might be a better fit as a guard in the NFL. I don't know too much about some of the other late-round, first-round potential tackles, but to me, if you think he can be a good guard, if you add him, that makes a ton of sense. Now, he's not going to bring in any type of character concerns. He'll bring some value at 23. You have Flowers at left tackle. You got to work on the technique, but then maybe you can play DJ Fluker right tackle with Lamp and then Pugh as guards, Richburg in the middle, and all of a sudden I think you've strengthened up your line. Is Lamp a name that's potentially on their board?
My first mock draft for the Giants back in right around the Combine, I had Forrest Lamp as a guy I would think the Giants would take. I think I had him to the Colts at 15 in my last mock draft. I like what you're saying. See, if I'm picking an offensive line for the Giants, I need, and I agree with you that he's more. Lamp is probably the best interior guy in the draft. I don't know necessarily if I'd go after the interior because I think you're already going to have to pay Richburg and Pugh down the road, really, after this season. You're going to have to make determinations on them. I think the guy to look at is Garrett Bowles. You know, he's got age questions. He's going to be 25 next month, but he's from Utah. But I think as far as a pure, like, left tackle, right tackle guy, I think Bowles is the pick. The Giants have visited with him. He's come to East Rutherford and met with them. I just don't know if they like him enough to bring him in the mix and say, you know what, if he can play left tackle, we're gonna bench Eric Flowers, or we're gonna move Eric Flowers and start this experiment. I just don't see it. I mean, you hear a lot from national guys talking about the Giants are going to move up for an offensive lineman.
They rarely do that.
Everything I've heard about this offensive line class, and even from the Giants, the idea that they don't love what they see. I mean, do they think that these guys – see, and that's the difference, Rich. These guys have the potential of being good players. In 2 years, if you tell me Ryan Ramczyk just made a Pro Bowl for somebody, the kid out of Wisconsin, if you tell me he made a Pro Bowl, I'd say, okay, you know, it seems like offensive linemen from Wisconsin are always making Pro Bowls. but the reality is you're also dealing with a 2017 situation, and if you don't think that guy is better than what Eric Flowers is at left tackle right now, and you're not sure, then you might be best served going elsewhere and then finding another project to bring in as an offensive lineman in the second round or third round. That's why I like a kid like Dawkins from Temple. You bring him in, and now all of a sudden, you know, maybe he surprises you. Maybe by October you look at him and go, look, Flowers is struggling. This kid Dawkins is really coming into his own. We didn't think he'd be this good this quickly. Well, now maybe you move him to left tackle and say, all right, Eric, we gave you enough shot, and now it's got to move that way.
Yeah, and here's the one thing. You can't, you know, the coaching staff is, I'm really mad at you. You can't be stubborn. You know, you got that window of opportunity, and
they were
it's
stubborn
right there.
last
They
year.
were, of course they were.
They were stubborn last year.
They were, and it was, if you're a Giants fan, you watch some of that. It was frustrating to watch. A couple more quickies again. Art Stapleton joins us for a couple moments. Covers the Giants for The Record and NorthJersey.com. Two kind of overall draft questions, and then quickly, any updates on the Giants and LeGarrette Blount?
What do you want? Do you want
the Blount? Well, yeah. Give me. Actually, no. I'm sorry. I'm going to ask you two just generic draft questions. But as far as Blount, Blount with the Giants. I mean, is that is that something the Giants are really considering signing him?
I think there's legit interest on both sides. I think the Giants like the idea of bringing in a guy to complement Paul Perkins and Shane Vereen in the backfield. I do think the Giants will look for a back in the draft as well, kind of more of that in between the tackles, a guy who can complement Perkins. I think there's interest on Blount. I mean, let's be honest, there aren't many open doors right now. The Mike Gillislee offer sheet to the Patriots with the Bills declining. I mean, Gillislee really takes that role from Blount. My question is, if they wait until after the draft, what's the rush to try to do it before the draft? If you're LeGarrette Blount, your options may decrease after the draft, but your options may open up after the draft because some teams may be going in saying, "No, we're not interested. We want to go draft someone." And then if they don't get the guy that they like in the draft,
that's right. You're
more
appealing.
All of a sudden, Blount is sitting there in June going, "Hey guys, I had 18 touchdowns for the Super Bowl champs last year. Give me a contract." So I think it's possible. I mean, I've been hearing whispers about Blount for months, and I didn't think the Giants would go the veteran back direction for Adrian Peterson or even a Blount or Jamal Charles until the draft, until after the draft when those guys came knocking on the door. And I think Blount essentially will come knocking on the door. It doesn't hurt that he's repped by the same agent as Odell Beckham Jr., so there are conversations being had with the Giants and Blount's representation.
And you mentioned could be a nice little change of pace back with Perkins and Vereen, a healthy Vereen catching the ball out of the backfield. Two more quickies for you. When you look at the draft as a whole, I've been hearing McCaffrey to me, Christian McCaffrey is so interesting because I think he's so versatile. I think he can be a great fit with the Eagles and right in our backyard. He can be a good fit with Carolina. I think he'd be the best route runner if you put him on that offense right away. What are you hearing about Christian McCaffrey, and is this a smokescreen, or do you really think this kid could potentially be a top 10 draft pick?
Yeah, I don't think McCaffrey gets out of top 15. I do think that if somehow the Panthers couldn't go up and get Leonard Fournette, I think they would probably prefer Fournette slightly ahead of McCaffrey. But that's exactly where I had McCaffrey at 8 to Carolina. I would think a team like the Giants, I know, loves Christian McCaffrey. They drafted Ed McCaffrey back when, even though his father ended up having his Super Bowl year with Denver. But I love McCaffrey. I think he's perfect for today's NFL. I think really, if you're just talking about today's NFL, you'd have to put McCaffrey at the top, and then maybe if he didn't have the off-the-field concerns, Dalvin Cook 2, and maybe Fournette 3. If this was 1995, Leonard Fournette might be the number 1 pick overall in the NFL draft. Right now, I think he'll kind of fall in that, top 5 range. I like Jacksonville to take him, but I'm in love with McCaffrey. I think Giants fans, I can tell you, are rooting against the idea of a McCaffrey to Philly situation and a Dalvin Cook to either Philly or Washington, which I think both are possible. And if that were to happen, I think Giants fans would be very unhappy.
Got about 30 seconds. And this might be a loaded question, who is out of these quarterbacks, who do you think is going to have the best career? Not the biggest upside, but out of these quarterbacks coming out, who do you think will have the best career?
That's a great. Oh man, you know what? I think it's going to be Deshaun Watson, and I know there are questions about his arm strength, but I think Deshaun Watson is in a position where he may be out of the contention for a team that wants to bring him in and start right away. So I think he may end up in a Pittsburgh, San Diego, even the Giants situation that maybe somebody takes him late in the first round and says, Deshaun, sit for a couple of years. Yep. We like your intangibles. And then all of a sudden, I don't want to put him at the level of Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers, the way he did with Brett Favre, maybe there's something about Watson that I like, and I think in the right system he might be able to do it. So I'll say Deshaun Watson and stick with that.
I'll tell you this in closing. It's funny you said that because I mentioned the other day, you look at John Dorsey, who's with the Packers in 2005. They sat, they waited, they grabbed Rodgers. Now he's with Kansas City. To me, maybe they take a flyer on Watson. You pair him up with Andy Reid. Alex Smith is not going to be the quarterback in the next 3 to 5 years, but you never know. I think the kid's got some upside as well. So certainly something that bears worth watching.
And watch for the back end of the first round. With that fifth-year option for first-round draft picks, it helps if you can take a developmental quarterback at the end of the first round because you get that fifth year out of a contract, and you're not talking about big money if that guy's ready to go.
That's a great point. Art, great stuff, wonderful insight. I appreciate you jumping on board for a couple moments. Enjoy it tomorrow. We'll certainly recap everything maybe next week in a week or two, but appreciate a couple moments today.
Absolutely, no problem. Appreciate it.
All right, you got it. Art Stapleton really does a good job. Really extremely knowledgeable, and again covers the Giants for the Record and NorthJersey.com.